Hoenoki, Hoese Peconia, Ben Barnes Nite Sito, Okimas Wanoki, Keto Yokupi. Senate Committee on Indian Affairs, Madam Chair, Murkowski, Vice Chairman Schatz, Senator Mullen, other senators of the committee, Niome for inviting me. My name is Ben Barnes, Chief of the Shawnee Tribe and Chair of the United Indian Nations of Oklahoma, serving the 38 federally recognized tribal nations in Oklahoma. I also serve as the chair of the National Native American Boarding School Healing Coalition. Let me begin with the truth that elders teach us. Sovereignty is the inheritance of survival, not the reward for claiming it. Our nations exist because our ancestors endured forced removal, warfare, termination policies, and the boarding school system. Federal recognition does not make a tribe. It acknowledges a people who never ceased to exist. When the United States forced my people from Ohio through Kentucky and Missouri to Kansas and finally to Oklahoma, we did not reinvent ourselves at each river we came to. We remained Shawnee. We carried our ceremonies in secret. We kept our language alive in whispers. Our government lived in the hearts of our people, even when the United States wished it would just vanish. Nationhood is not a label to be chosen, but an identity carried through generations of removal, loss, and resistance. I have seen what happens when identity becomes something someone can simply declare. Across every homeland we were forced through, Ohio, Missouri, Kentucky, Kansas, there are now groups calling themselves Shawnee who do not speak our language. They hold no Shawnee ceremonies, they appear nowhere in historical record or records or rolls, and they have no documented Shawnee ancestors or ties to our community. The first time that one of these groups opened a bank account using the name Shawnee, I learned a hard lesson. If identity becomes self-assertion instead of a documented history, sovereignty becomes a sandcastle waiting for the tide. That is why we are here, to defend the sovereignty paid for in blood, land, and with children. Now, in turning to the matter before this committee, for years, this group has moved from identity to identity, Lost Colony, Croatan, Cherokee, Chiraw, Siouan, Lumbee, changing claims but never producing documentation to support any of them. And so, the United Indian Nations of Oklahoma turned to a respected historian and genealogist to examine the record. That research did not attempt to define who the Lumbee are. It simply asked a single question. Can the Lumbees' tribal claims be verified by historical and genealogical evidence? The resounding answer was no. The expert found no demonstrated descent from a historical tribal nation, no continuous tribal government before the mid-20th century, no ancestral indigenous language community, and census records showing that ancestors identified as free persons under British and American law, but never as a tribal polity. These findings do not come from emotion or politics. They come from archives, from documents, and history. Now I must speak from a sacred place, a place where grief and memory live in our communities. As chair of the National Native American Boarding School Healing Coalition, I have carried the names of Native children who never came home. I have walked the ground where they lie without markers. I have sat with survivors who still flinch when they hear their native languages because it only brought punishment. The Lumbee have invoked boarding school history to claim indigeneity, but the record tells another story. 9 individuals now held up in Lumbee narratives attempted to enroll at the Carlisle Indian Industrial School. Carlisle rejected them because they did not meet the federal definition of Indian. They were only admitted after claiming, falsely, to be Cherokee. An independent genealogical review shows not one of the 9 had Native ancestry. Yet their descendants now identify as Lumbee, and Lumbee leadership presents that episode as proof of tribal status. That is not survivorship. That is borrowing our pain to manufacture a political identity. Our children's trauma is not a credential. Our unmarked graves are not a strategy. Our ancestors' suffering is not a political accessory. To allow trauma to be impersonated is to betray the memory of the children and to denigrate oneself. There is a path established to federal recognition, the Office of Federal Acknowledgement. It exists to examine the history, continuity, and nationhood. It is open to the Lumbee, but they have been told that they may use it. They refuse. The truth is simple. People confident in their history do not avoid the place where history is examined. So I close with where I began, with sovereignty. Tribal nations predate the United States. Federal recognition does not create us, it acknowledges us. If Congress replaces documented history with political momentum, if identity becomes a matter of assertion rather than continuity, then this body will not be recognizing tribes, it will be manufacturing them. And once that begins, sovereignty will not be defined by history, but by votes. Niwe, Nukuch Chaye, Hinileki, I welcome your questions.